Good evening. What fine attendance tonight. We're so glad that all of you braved this terrible Atlanta spring weather to get here tonight. I want to thank you on behalf of Public Broadcasting Atlanta and our partners, the Nature Conservancy and the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library and Museum. What a nice place to have an event like this tonight. I would like to recognize two of our board members from Public Broadcasting Atlanta who are with us tonight. Tom Yamamoto and Andrew Filer are with us back there. And I would like to take care of one little piece of housekeeping. Now, I know this doesn't apply to anybody in this room because I know you all have made your pledges and that I won't need to tell you about this at all. However, you can tell your friends that beginning next week, WABE's Spring Radio Pledge Drive commences with Cyber Day on Tuesday, the 22nd, and with The Real Deal on Wednesday, the 23rd through May 2nd. And if you happen to have forgotten that number, it is 678-553-99. Yes, I knew you have. I would also like to mention to you that we are recording this event for our Atlanta Forum network. So if you miss any parts or you find out how wonderful this is and you want to share it with your friends, tell them they can go to pba.org and find more information. I would like to further, in the housekeeping area, tell you that the Stories from the Heart of the Land will air on WABE on Earth Day on April the 20th and the following Sunday, April 27th at 7 p.m., and more times to be announced later because there are more parts. Now, to introduce Jay Allison, we don't really have enough time for that, so I have the abridged version. Jay is a key word here that we like. Jay is an independent broadcast journalist. His work airs on NPR's All Things Considered in Morning Edition, PRI's This American Life, ABC News' Nightline, and other national programs. And one of my favorites, he is now heard weekly on NPR as the curator and co-producer of This I Believe. Really one of my favorite elements of public radio. Over the last 25 years, he has created hundreds of documentaries, essays, and special series for national and international broadcast, and has won virtually every major industry award for his productions and collaborations, including the DuPont Columbia and 5 Peabodys. He was the 1996 recipient of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting's Edward R. Murrow Award for outstanding contributions to public radio, this industry's highest honor. In 2002, further, he received the Public Radio News Director's Leo C. Lee Award for lasting commitment to public radio journalism. I'm having to cut it off there because we don't have enough time to tell you all the other accomplishments, but I do want to then segue into why we're here tonight. Stories from the Heart of the Land is a 6-part radio series hosted by Jay that ranges across the world from Australia to Newfoundland to Mexico and Tibet, to capture the human connection to the land and the landscape. And now, without further ado, Jay Allison.
Hello, everybody. You look familiar, like you listen to public radio. Did you send in your pledge? The number at our station is 508. I once gave out my home number on the air. I think it's against the law. I want to talk a little bit about radio and voice, and then I want to play you some of the excerpts from this new series, Stories from the Heart of the Land, which I really like, and which you'll be able to hear in Atlanta. And you can also get it, these days, everything's served up every which way. I mean, you can get it as a podcast, and you can get it on iTunes, and and I think that may be one of the reasons that public radio, local public radio station is somewhat under threat because of all of your options. And you can get the programs you want all sorts of ways. And the only reason to listen to a local public radio station, and more this will be true as you get satellite radio and internet delivery and podcast and other ways to bring it into your house, is because it's here, because it's local, because it's on the ground. And I started further down the biography that John didn't get to. I started the radio stations where I live, which is in Cape Cod. And so the stations up there for Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, and the Cape and the South Coast were started a few years ago. And we had a blank canvas trying to figure out what can we do that will make these radio stations not muck radio, that will make them sound like a place, And our decision was that we needed to carry the stories of the people who live there, and they had to kind of permeate the broadcast day. Muriel Rukeyser, the poet, says the universe is made not of atoms but of stories. Stories are what define us. They're what connect us. They're what divide us. This series, do many of you know this series, This I Believe, that we produce every week, and we've got a book out now, and that's been a remarkable effort at aggregating and inviting stories from all over the world. We now stand at more than close to 45,000 people have sent in essays to us. And, that's a non-trivial request. It's not asking you to vote for the best singer. It's asking you to write 500 words on the thing that matters most in your life. It's a remarkable challenge, and people have risen to it. And it is a shared story. All of my work in public broadcasting, in a way, is about that notion that the power of a shared story can break down barriers in really unexpected ways. Radio, the human voice gets inside you. You don't have earlids. And so you're defenseless in a way. And I don't know if those of you that do listen to public radio maybe have a moment when you're ambushed a little bit by even the way a person breathes, or the way they, have trouble saying something in a moment, or by a pause, by a silence. And it bypasses the mind and can go to the heart. And there's a huge power in that. It's what brought me into radio now it's about 30 years ago. I walked in off the street. Just walked in, and they loaned me a tape recorder down at National Public Radio in Washington. They didn't have a security system at the time. And so I'd go in at night, and I'd borrow gear and take tape and razor blades. I took out a little reel-to-reel tape recorder all over the country. It was like an excuse to discover the world. It was an amazing opportunity. And in many ways, since then, my goal has been to try to give that back and send other people out with tape recorders, loan out tape recorders. At our radio station, we loan them out to anybody who wants them. I do these websites. One's called transom.org. It gives you all the tools you need to tell your own stories on public radio, because I like this idea of the invitational, neighborly concept of public radio at the national level and the local level. So the local level, we go out with these tape recorders, and we air these little stories all day long, 30 seconds and a minute, and the radio station in Atlanta is starting to do a similar project here. They call it Atlanta Sounds here. And ours, you'll hear 10 a day, and they're oral history. It's almost like an ongoing oral history of the place. And our community we're tied to the water, and I'm going to get to the nature series in a second, but when the Nature Conservancy came to me and said, would you like to do a series about place? I said, yes. This is really what I think is that's what holds us together, is our connection to place. As audience members of a public radio station, that's all we really have in common, maybe a sensibility, but a connection to our place, a feeling of being neighborly. And sometimes not so neighborly, People living on Martha's Vineyard think they're better than the people on Nantucket, and vice versa. It's not so different from anywhere else in the world. We're parochial, we're tribal, we're competitive. But if you're on Martha's Vineyard and you hear, suddenly you hear a voice, and these things come on unheralded. And it's a guy telling a story about how he caught a bluefin tuna with his bare hands in the rocks, and he pulled it out and actually got it up on the beach with his friends, and he lifted it up over his head. And you're listening to that story, and you're thinking, that's a good story. I like that guy. And I'm going to remember that. I hope I meet him someday. But at the end of the story, you hear he's from Martha's Vineyard. So you have to adjust your worldview. And in some sense, that's what runs through all of this. It runs through This I Believe. It runs, whether it's Gloria Steinem you might not agree with or Newt Gingrich. When you encounter them on a human level, and maybe there's something about their story that touches you and surprises you and philosophically jars you in terms of your preconceptions. See, that's the other thing about radio. You can't see. You can't be prejudiced because you're blind. And that's another remarkable bit of power, because when we suspend judgment, we maybe make a judgment other than that we would have by somebody's appearance, by their age, by their race, by their face, by their prettiness, by their, how they fit our preconceived. The great sound designer Walter Murch says that we are pickled in a brine of sound in the womb, that's the first of our senses to be switched on, but later it's the tyranny of the eye that takes over. But at first, it's that we are suckled by sound. And so that's the power that, I think we're dealing with in radio, and the power I wanted to bring to this series when I started talking to the Nature Conservancy about it. And I said, I don't want to do a standard environmental series because the story arc is always the same. There's something wrong in the natural world. Something's out of balance. It's our fault. There are people working to try to make it better. They may or may not succeed. There is some hope, but things are basically getting worse. And I think we're so accustomed to that kind of narrative arc of the environmental story that we don't really hear it anymore. It comes on the radio or in the print, and you go, I know this, and we're inured to it, and therefore it doesn't affect us, and therefore we aren't able to transform a little bit and have that moment where a worldview is changed. So the real pleasure for me, so I said that the Conservancy will produce this, and I want to say it's been just wonderful. I mean, it's wonderful working in public broadcasting. It's been great working with the Conservancy. They, said, look, just go raise consciousness, whatever, and in fact, because they were involved in the funding, we couldn't do stories on the Conservancy. There's nothing in here about the Conservancy itself, but it's about the connection to land and landscape that people experience around the world. And we were able to send 35 of the best producers and writers in public radio out and say to them, speak in a way that you don't usually talk. Don't use your reporter voice. Don't do that presentational thing that we all know. Look, we rely on it. It delivers the headlines, and, we're accustomed to that tone, that public radio tone. And it serves a certain purpose, but it can also lull, and it can distance, and it can make you feel as if everything's going to be okay. It's all been planned. Nothing's going to alarm you. Nothing's going to happen out of the ordinary. And my hope with this series was that it wouldn't feel that way, that you would hear people speaking like themselves. They would drop their usual modes. And I want to start, I'm going to play little bits. Maybe we'll dim the lights. Can we still do that? Because it's nice to listen. Play little bits from some of these stories. The first one I want to play is from Elizabeth Arnold, who's, if you've been listening to public radio a long time, she was the White House correspondent for years at NPR. And then, as I was saying to someone earlier, followed the usual career arc and became a commercial fisherwoman in Alaska. She lives up there now. She, raising a kid and has rides a Harley and fishes for salmon and crabs. But she's still reporting and traveling all over the world. And the first place we sent her was the Great Bear Rainforest, which I don't know if you're familiar with this tract of land. People from the Conservancy could tell you more about it. It's an astonishing, vast area of rainforest with every imaginable kind of exotic creature. The spirit bear is up there. I think maybe millions of acres. I think maybe it's with the Canadian government, U.S. government, First Nations, private, public, and they're preserving it. And Elizabeth went out into the middle of it by herself with a little tape recorder while the salmon were running, which means while the bears were feeding. And she's in. Look, Elizabeth is intrepid, as you will hear, and I'll play a couple of things from her. But this is her out there by herself when she first got there.
But last time we heard from her, she was in the Great Bear Rainforest, standing alone, watching grizzlies feed on the salmon.
Okay, there's a huge grizzly bear. It just came out of nowhere. And I'm really hoping... Oh, God, it's right there. Okay. I'm not going to move. God, where did he come from? God, he's coming this way. Okay, I think I'm at a safer distance now, but who the hell knows in a place like this? You know, and that's the thing about wild places is you get lulled into, you know, the cliche part of it all where the bald eagles are above you and the snow-capped mountains are all around you, and then something like that happens, and it's wild. That's the part of it that makes it so special. Jesus.
Well, she's fine. But I don't know if you know about, like, to use a mic like this to get that volume of sound from a source like that, she was that bear's throat was very close to her. I work with other people in this series. One is Emily Botine, who's a wonderful producer who co-produced this with me. We sort of sent the producers out around the world and then sort of brought them back in. We sort of air traffic control the thing. But Vicki Merrick, who I also work with, who's not an outdoors person, not a camper, heard that from Elizabeth and said, "That makes me want to go out in the woods and be scared." I mean, I know what she means, you know, because it's, I think the thing that sort of happens to you listening to the story, the kind of unsettled, what's going to happen, well, but what about the bears, are they there? You know, I think, you know, that feeling of being a little lost or a little frightened, it holds your attention on the radio, but it also holds it in real life. I mean, I think when you're lost or think you might be in trouble, those are the most vivid times. And I think the natural world, if we give it a chance, can mete those out to us occasionally, hopefully without too much incident. But the feeling of being very alive and connected backwards through time to all the other men and women who've come before and have stood next to a wild creature in that way. It's an astonishing phenomenon, and I think that comes out in Elizabeth's story. I'll just play another tiny little bit of Elizabeth. It's very quiet. She doesn't talk much. It's very quiet. We asked her where else she wanted to go, and we sent her to Mongolia. She went out she sent an invoice. And the invoice was for rental of a Russian Jeep and for a sheep, which we slaughtered en route for food. Those are like the two items on her expense report. It was an interesting story because it was about space. No, they didn't. They had. She went with a bunch of Mongolians who set up tents, and they would stay huddled in the tent in the middle of vastness. because, you know, I think maybe when you have that kind of vastness around you, you tend to want to have a little more closeness. You know, she would ride on trains through China, and people would get on the train, there'd be room all over the place, and they'd come stand right next to her. You know, it made her nervous because she likes to be way out by herself. So she would keep getting up out of the tent and leaving and wandering off into the desert. But they were very happy. It was an interesting meditation on space and how we use it and how we occupy it and how we feel about ourselves as a species and how communal or companionable we really are. But the other place we sent her was the North Pole. And like I said, she's intrepid. She'd been there once before, and she swore she'd never go back. She said it made her behave in ways that she couldn't even understand, that once she went into another person's tent and saw a candy bar there and stole it. She doesn't even quite know why. It was something to do with, you know, her survival, she thought, or... But I just want to play you Elizabeth arriving by herself on her skis in, you know, I think it's -40 weather, you know, going through the ice, you know, because up there the ice is melting, and, you know, the Arctic Sea under her and the ice moving across it. And so here's Elizabeth getting there.
Well, I'm standing at the North Pole. Who gets to say that? I'm in the company of dead men with big dreams and extreme adventurers and scientists and complete and total wackos. I am standing right now at the North Pole. The North Pole. Let's make sure here. Still right on this spot. That's what the GPS says. 90 degrees. So, this is right this minute, for this very minute anyway, really the top of the world.
She said that she realized that at that moment, if she took a step in any direction, she'd be going south. The other thing that happened to her while she was there, the crazy people that she referred to, there are Russians and Finns who just are bonded with this place for its mystical quality and the crazy world. There's a airstrip up there and a whole culture. It would be a fascinating documentary all of its own. But the one thing they do is lead trips for the very wealthy to get up there and kind of put a flag in the place. And while she was there, one of them had an accident and couldn't get there on skis, so they helicoptered him, and she watched as he helicoptered, and it's in the radio piece, landed, teed up a golf ball on the North Pole, and struck it, called on the satellite phone to tell his kids that he'd done it, and got back in the helicopter and left. Well, yeah, and so she skied on out of there after that. But that's in the story, and it's just kind of it's a very telling moment of sound, just hearing that thwack of the golf ball after this kind of silent moment that she's had there. I'm not even sure what it says, but it's. I want to play a little excerpt, partly to be able to tell you this. It's a sideways story. This is from a guy named James Spring. And, you know, partly in our endeavor to bring in new voices, which we did in this series, James's actual job is he's a marketing director for a pest control company in San Diego. But he's also a writer and wants to do public radio. And he's good, and he's intrepid also. He took a motorcycle down into Mexico in the Sierra Madre by himself, mostly in the pouring rain, looking at what's happening to the forests there and to the Indian communities under the pressure of timbering and mostly of drugs, and the opportunities to grow marijuana and poppies as opposed to whatever, and to clear off the land and change these remote villages forever. So he's out there by himself on his motorcycle. I'll just play you a little bit of this. Yeah, and then I'll tell you what he did last week.
At the far end of the valley, we run into a Tarahumara woman in a cornfield. The field looks to be about 7 acres. If there's enough water this season for her to grow corn, and if there's no flooding, she might be able to harvest enough food to carry the family through much of the winter. I think about that little marijuana field. With about 1/10 the labor, this woman would be able to feed her family for the entire year. Someday soon, I think, she's going to realize it too. That night, I used the satellite phone to call home. "Hi, Addie," I say. "Hi, Daddy," she says. "Are you being a good girl for Mommy?" "Yeah." From where I stand, I could throw a rock into the middle of an opium poppy field. "We danced ballet," Addie says, "like this." And in my mind, I see her spinning, her arms above her head. I've been told the Indian village on the other side of the ridge is home to 300 widows and orphans, their fathers assassinated in disputes over timber and drugs. "We played," Addie says. "Brooke." "You played with your friend Brooke," I say. "Yeah." While we speak, heroin from the Sierra Madre is coursing into the U.S. "You come home?" Addie says. "I'll be home soon." "I love you," I say. "I love you," she says. And I hear my wife coaching. "See you soon." When the call ends, I look into the night sky. So many stars, and I can't find a single one I recognize anymore.
James Spring, outside his tent in Churiachi, Mexico. The Sierra Madre.
All right, so I'll tell you what happened to James last week. First of all, that music, this was an unusual radio series because we had the whole it's 6-hour-long programs. We had the whole thing, a few exceptions from some producers who used their own music, but most of it was scored by Bill Frisell. Do you know he's a great guitar player in so many different styles, and we went up and recorded him for several days in Seattle, and so it's almost like a character in the whole series. It runs through it. If you don't know his music, you should check him out. He's a beautiful, beautiful player, and he did it with a quartet with cello and viola and violin. So just very quickly, because I haven't had a chance to tell anybody this story, and I think NPR is going to do a piece about it, but James, who I've gotten to know since then, and we actually went motorcycling down the Baja together, and we've gotten to be friends. He knows Mexico well. He's fluent in Spanish. He knows the Baja. He's turning 40 and wanted to do something that had some meaning, and he thought, well, what am I good at? What do I do that could be helpful to somebody else? And he thought, well, one thing that happens, I know the Baja, and I'm able to get my way around there in ways that other people can't. He's raced the Baja 1000 and all those sorts of things, and he knows the terrain. He said, a lot of people get lost down there, and they can't be found. Maybe I could find somebody. So he started Googling missing and Baja. And a week ago Sunday, he got a hit, and it turned out that there were some fugitives who were the main suspects in a rather famous San Francisco murder. They had murdered their housemate, and the van had been found with the body in it, and the police impound a week later. They, in the meantime, had left, picked up their kids of whom they did not have custody, and left for the border. And then they lost cell phone contact, and they ended up in the Baja. Well, when he Googled this, they'd been seen by someone in a Baja village. But the response from the police was, as James said, it was as if they'd been seen on Jupiter, that people said, well, they'll never be found. And James said, well, and the little girl had also been taken, and James said, well, I think I could find them. So he printed up 2,500 wanted posters and drove down into the Baja, leaving them at military checkpoints along the way, stopping in, seeing all the people he knew in the stores and restaurants and putting them up. And within 24 hours, someone said, oh, I've seen them. They're in a house over there. And he got in touch with the Mexican police, and they got armed in flak jackets and went there and found the couple who'd been accused, and the police arrested them, and they extradited them and brought them back into the United States within 48 hours with the little girls who were reunited with the grandmother. And anyway, it's just such a kind of an extreme way to honor your 40th birthday. And when he called me, he said, the strangest thing has happened, I didn't, anyway. So listen for that story on public radio. But the next piece I want to play is from a great reporter named Sean Cole. And, well, we found that we explored what are people's connection to land and landscape. And you may not be surprised to know that for a significant portion of the population, the connection's through television. That what they know of the natural world is what they've seen on TV. They may not have the opportunity to travel, the means, the interest, but essentially their knowledge of, sort of nature with a capital N is through TV. So we thought we ought to pay some attention to that in this series. So this is Sean Cole.
Radio like to think we're pretty good at conjuring the splendor of nature and the feelings it evokes. But we know you think nature documentary, and right away you think TV. Indeed, some folks think about those TV programs a lot.
I think my favorite subjects are rainforests.
There was a night where we'd be like, are we in the mood for insects tonight? I don't know.
African cats.
I grew up in the suburbs of Illinois. You didn't see a lot of lions.
And
elephants on the beach.
Just anything to do with the water.
What did it start with? Blue Planet?
I think Blue Planet was sort of the thing that really kicked it off.
Our planet is a blue planet. Over 70% of it is covered by the sea.
And this is their prophet.
David Attenborough.
David Attenborough.
David Attenborough.
He's the father of this kind of program.
Life of Mammals, Planet Earth.
Life of Birds.
The superb fairy range.
You suddenly have this great empathy for the natural world via him.
And if it isn't David Attenborough, it's some show on PBS or Animal Planet, but really, it's David Attenborough. His devotees are a kind of species all their own, and we wondered what it would sound like if he did a program about them. It might start like this.
Fans of nature documentaries tend to nest in an urban setting, like this one, Brookline, Massachusetts.
So that's Sean, and then he goes on in sort of Attenborough fashion, kind of chronicling in an interesting way this species that's hooked on TV for its understanding and appreciation of nature. And actually, they make a rather strong case for how powerful those programs are. And we were at the Atlanta Aquarium. I mean, I think aquariums, zoos, these programs all have in some way the ability to capture imagination of those who otherwise are going to have no contact with the outdoors. I mean, I think there's maybe I think there's a book out on the nature deficit, and I'm here with my son Walker, and we have the good fortune to be able to go down to the swamp to Dick Neesmith's place coming up in the next few days. But just the chance to kind of experience that that feeling of wildness and to be outside is, that's how I became, connected to place, was my parents, introduced me to it. And without that, I don't know how you get it. So I'm going to play a couple other pieces about people who are, having trouble appreciating nature, who are afraid of it, who find it mysterious and unknowable. One of them is Jonathan Goldstein in Canada. And Jonathan was very worried about nature and felt as if it was unpredictable and a difficult place to be. But he has an 11-year-old stepdaughter named Arizona who loves it outside. And so we sent them a tent and told them to go camping together.
For me, the pleasure of going camping has been equal parts what's in the woods, alongside of what isn't. The ringing phones, the sound of traffic, the obligation of constant emails. And once you get rid of all that stuff, what you're left with is just being, spending time. And I love spending time with Arizona.
Wow, it is so dark. Okay, let's step outside. We gotta take a look at the sky. Come on.
There won't be that many stars out. They come out around like 11 or 10.
Is that true? I thought they come out like when it's dark, and it's so dark.
Yeah, you're not gonna see much.
And I'm gonna want to come back here. I like it here. You?
Maybe next time with veggie dogs instead of the regular kind. We would have to do it again. I meant it. At least until the next morning, as we were packing up the tent.
This guy, Longlegs, lost. It's his front small leg, and his back big leg.
What do you think he's missing a leg? No,
He only has 6 legs.
Okay, but don't. I think he could bite you though.
He won't bite me. It's a daddy Longlegs.
Don't they bite?
No.
That's Jonathan Goldstein and his daughter, Arizona, camping near their home in Montreal.
You really care about the wild, eh? You're a friend to man and beast alike, right down to the last daddy longlegs.
Move. I gotta pick it up.
A second camping trip is in the cards, but they haven't set a date.
We all live in a yellow submarine. Yellow submarine. Yellow submarine.
Jonathan told us Arizona recently went tracking for beaver and fell into a beaver lodge. He wasn't along. She was with her grandmother.
Sky of blue, sky of blue, and
sea
of green, sea of green, in our yellow, in our yellow
submarine.
Submarine, aha!
We are.
I had to get to that because I like his Ringo impression there. But if you listen to the radio show This American Life, which is one of my favorite shows, and Ira Glass and I are good friends who started in public radio about the same time, Jonathan's work appears there quite a bit. He's a great storyteller and writer. You should listen for his work. I think Arizona's been featured in quite a bit of it. Another person we encountered, we tried to figure out what to do about urban dwellers who really have had no opportunity to get out of that environment. And this is a woman named Natalie Edwards. Her mother's from Jamaica. She lives in Brooklyn. Her mother is deathly afraid of nature and has been grew up instructing Natalie to be afraid of it. She had never set foot in Prospect Park, had never touched grass, was afraid of trees, and so we decided to do an intervention. And so this is Natalie Edwards with a tape recorder walking for the first time in her life into Prospect Park.
The reason why we're here is because I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to get over my fear of nature. Right now, we're outside of the park. We're outside of the park. The trees are scary because they're tall. They hover over you like they're about to fall. They're like insects. All right, so part of my intervention is I'm going to walk through the park. We're just going to take it slow, one step at a time. Okay, now I'm going to touch the grass. It feels all right. It just, I don't know. Now my hand is dirty. Oh, now we're off the grass. Yay! I would clap, but I don't want the dirt from my right hand to go on my left hand because I touched the grass and the grass was dirty. I really do want to start liking nature. I want to like nature. I want to feel what everyone else is feeling when they come to the park. But what I really want to do right now is go home and take a shower.
So the interesting news about Natalie, when she told us that she said she had a boyfriend who liked going outdoors, she says, he wants us to go out there and spend the night. I don't know, he calls it camping. But since then, something about it drew her back. She's been in the park. She's become a member of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden and is now taking her nephew and niece there. So something worked about that intervention. And, it may not, I don't know how far the influence spread, but something took with her, and we feel good about that. Let me, I'm just going to play this. This wasn't from the nature series, but it was one of the. I've talked about going to the swamp. It's a Florida swamp, but probably not so very different. I just love the sound. You'll mostly just hear the sound. And the person speaking is of Lance Corporal Jim McMullen. He served in Vietnam and had a lot of post-traumatic stress, went into the swamp trying, he hoped, to save the Florida panther and sort of work out a lot of his guilt and ambivalence about his war experience. So you'll just hear a little bit of his voice. But I just play it because I was looking around for cuts to play here, and I came across it, and maybe you living down here, maybe this sound is an everyday thing to you, but to me it's really deep and three-dimensional and embracing. So it's just like 50 seconds of it.
That's fantastic sound. Isn't that incredible? This is my swamp. This is the panther's swamp. And it does get to you. It starts vibrating right down into you. What can you be afraid of out here at this time? Nothing. I just didn't stay here the rest of the night.
Well, I love a swamp. Everybody loves a different place. I think that's one thing that happens in this series is that you feel people's connection to whether it's a mountain in Tibet or an ice flow or a swamp. And in the next story, it's a little patch of prairie, and it is in Illinois, and it's done by a young producer named Kelly McEvers. She had never, well, I think she tells it. She's standing in the rain next to this little bit of prairie that's been restored by her friend who was a teacher and mentor and always asked her to come see what he'd done because he'd restored all the native grasses. But he died before she could go, and she made the piece about visiting.
Okay. I was standing in a, wow, I had no idea how hard this was going to be. I'm standing in a 3-acre plot of land that used to be a cornfield. In 1991, my friend Bob started restoring this piece of land to its original state as a tall grass prairie. And then he died. When Bob was alive, he always asked me to come here and check out the prairie. But I was too busy and running around a bunch of places to ever come and see it. So I'm here now to check it out. When it stops raining, right now the grass is almost as tall as me. There's a memorial to Bob up here. It says Robert Bob Rabig, whose dream and tireless dedication preserved this piece of living history.
And piece goes on and talks more about him and the impact he's had. And I think one of the things, and maybe that story illustrates the thing I was talking about to begin with, is the way she's talking is not, it's not a headline, it's not information, there's stuff embedded in it. It's, she's improvising, you know, she doesn't know what she's going to say next. She repeats herself. There's emotion in it. I mean, it does all the things I think that, and yet it observes all the rules of journalism. It's very clear. It describes everything you need to know in a story is in that little bit of copy she did. But it's not that single level of, headline information that we're accustomed to. And I find that I'm, more interested to hear it the less I'm able to. I'm just happy to be able to hear people talking like people anymore on the air. I'm just going to play a couple more, and then maybe we'll have time for questions. And if you want, I can play you some of those little breaks we air during our broadcast day, if you want to hear some of those, which now you can hear on your own station here. This is a farmer in the Sierra in California. He's a rancher. At the time of recording, I believe 97 years old and still working and making a powerful case for the value of land and landscape and saving it. Attilio Genasi is his name.
Farming is a way of life. You have to love it. You don't farm and say, well, when I'm 65, I'll sell and retire and go to the city. That thought never entered my mind. I'm still working at 97. Like I told my family, I hope I die with my boots on out there working on the ranch. The land does not belong to me. The land belongs to future generations. And the land also belongs to the general public. It's one of the natural wonders that's there for humanity, and we dare not destroy it any more than we'd cap the geysers in Yellowstone or put the Bridal Veil Falls of Yosemite in a pipe. I think we have a natural wonder here that I'll do my best to preserve. When my wife and I were first married, a realtor stopped by and asked Angie if she'd sell him some land up next to the mountain there. He had a person wanted to build houses up there. And she told him in no uncertain terms that her land was not for sale, land or ever would be for sale to build houses on. And before she died, she said, I want my ashes scattered on the ranch here, on the fields north of the house. And I'm not going to let somebody build a house there with a cesspool where I scattered her ashes. And I'll never betray the trust that she placed in me.
Horn. So he passed away this last year at 99. But his land is left in trust and will be cared for. Maybe the last one, I think I'm supposed to finish up, but then we'll have a little time for questions. And, like I said, I've got so much stuff. I can play all kinds of stuff. Interestingly, for this, I believe, one of the other series I work on, a significant number of those essays, thousands, if you do a search in the word nature, thousands of them are about people who find their belief in the natural world. I mean, it's a way that in some way these two series have intersected. And we've even kind of used material that's come in through one in the other. I mean, the longer I do this work, that keeps happening. You pick something for the little portrait on the radio station, and it ends up being This I Believe essay, and then a nature series thing, and everything, threads run through everything. This last one he's a Latino writer. His name's Luis Arrea. He lives in Chicago now, but he grew up in the barrio in Los Angeles, he loved nature as a kid, but only the kind of microscopic nature he could encounter on the sidewalk. His parents didn't know it, but he had terrible vision. And so he could only see things that were very close up. I mean, they tried to put him on a baseball team, and he'd see other kids catch a ball, and he'd go, I don't know how they do that. I don't know how they can, see it to do it. But it was never clear that was his problem. So as I said, he would study the ants and things he could get very close to. He went to Mazatlan, where his family was from, and he always heard about it. And what a glorious place it was. And his uncle recognized him for being partially blind and said, this kid can't see, and took him immediately out to a local optometrist in Mazatlan and got him a pair of glasses.
Horn rims, I still remember. Ugly things, but I remember putting them on and stepping outside of the optometrist's office. The first thing I saw was a hill in Mazatlan. And the hill was completely covered in vegetation. And it was a shock to me because the vegetation actually had leaves. It wasn't a Monet version of an impressionistic hill with washes of green, but was actually a detailed living thing, and the leaves were moving, and there were birds flying among the leaves. And I remember just stopping and staring. It was a revelation that has probably never been equaled in my life, that moment of seeing that hill. There I was, seeing a place that had existed in myths in my family history. When we got back to the village, they showed me the iguanas. They showed me the snapping turtles in the streams. Red flowers, blue butterflies, green water. Hibiscus trees, not just bushes, but trees with flaming red flowers on them, and parrots flying through these beams of light. White ibis behind. That's what I remember. The natural world became mine. It became the place where I live. I no longer felt like I was trapped in concrete. I felt like I lived outside in the wind. I was trapped in poverty for a very long time. But once I was able to reach escape velocity and get out, I never stopped.
Well, one of the reasons I was drawn to do this series is, I have memories of encounters with nature that are like many of the stories in here, and that a lot of the places where that happened to me are gone now. I mean, they're built over by condos, or they're poisoned, or they're utterly changed because of the way water use is damage them, pollution, and the creatures that are there are no longer there, and that's in a single lifetime. And I think it's absolutely critical to look hard at what we're doing and how we're behaving, and to remember how connected we are and how precious it is and how much we get from it in ways that we don't even understand as individuals and as a species. So this series has been a real pleasure for me to work on. I hope you get to hear more of the stories from it. And it's been great to work with the Conservancy, and I know a lot of you are Conservancy supporters, and I applaud you for the for what you do to make sure that these places and others like them aren't damaged or gone forever. So thanks for having me here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yeah. The question is about what kind of recording equipment. The wonderful thing that's happening now is gear to record your own stories is getting cheaper and better all the time. I mean, I went out with a reel-to-reel machine. Now you can use a flash recorder that doesn't even use tape. Just records it right to a digital file. You put it on your computer. You have digital editing software. I mean, you used to have to have a full room with mixing consoles and multiple machines and multi-track recorders, and now you can do the whole thing on a laptop, and a lot of it with free software. If you're interested, go to transom.org, transom.org. We review all the. It's a site I'm really proud of. I started maybe 8 years ago with the nature writer Bill McKibben, who actually is part of this series too. You probably know his work. He wrote End of Nature, the seminal work on global warming, and he and I got the thing going. We have guests. It's sort of to pass the mission and purpose of public broadcasting on, and it's everyone from Studs Terkel to Ira Glass, talking about the importance of story and empathy, but it's a lot of hardcore information on what machine to buy, how they work, which mic, which headphones, and we keep up and review all the new flash recorders. Marantz 620 is good now. Little like that. Built-in mics. Yeah. Yeah, it is motley. The question is, they're fascinating but motley. It came all different ways. We did research, Emily and I, on stories, and we'd match producers with stories. Often, I mean, really what I did was ask the best producers in public radio. If you're a public radio aficionado, you would know them, people like Scott Carrier, the Kitchen Sisters, Charles Bowden, great nature writer, and we'd said, what story do you want to tell? Where do you want to go in the world, or what's the place that means the most to you? You know, and the Kitchen Sisters went to Wild Rivers because they are, they're Wild River. Not Scott Carrier went to Tibet, and people often pick their own places and brought the stories to us. In other cases, we would find a story and say, you know who that sounds like? I mean, we asked. Sean Cole said, we asked him, do you want to do a documentary on nature TV watchers? So it happened all kinds of ways. Yeah. Oh, good. What'd you get? Yeah, those are good too. Yeah, cheap. Zoom H2, cheap. It's amazing what's available now. The whole secret is close miking. If you get people right here, you hear how my voice changed just then, and this is about how close you have to mic somebody, and in the field, yeah. And if you do that, you get that sound that fills the whole speaker, and then can kind of get, insinuate itself, into you. And when you get back here, there's a difference of intimacy. And it's you can still hear it. It's legible, but it's not doing that thing that makes you pay attention. So that's radio production 101, 102, 103. Oh, right there. Okay, that's the difference between this. I do all the billboards. The question is, do I have a story? Because I have the radio stations, and I have so many projects going on, and this I believe every week. I did not go out into the world. I should have. I should have figured out some way to do it, but and also my wife was living in New York. I was back, and it was kind of impossible. So no, but I did the billboards, the 1 minute openers. Well, maybe I'll play you one of those. Well, maybe. Why don't you discuss what you've heard? Okay, well, I think here's one, but I would go. This is a billboard. It's the 1-minute tease before you go to the news from NPR, and then you come back with the show. So these are and I would go out in my boat or in the yard or climb a tree or whatever, and I would do these. Up at 5:30. Every morning these days, like this morning, I'm woken up at 5:30 a.m. because some sparrows build a nest in my bedroom window. It makes me feel connected to the natural world in a surprisingly intimate way, and it's driving me crazy. I'm Jay Allison, and that's pretty much the theme of our next hour on Stories from the Heart of the Land. Dreams of nature and nature waking us up from those dreams. We'll ponder the possibility of paradise with frogs in Hawaii, buffalo in the plains, and beavers in the backyard. That's all coming up on Stories from the Heart of the Land. And if I hit the window, by the way, they usually shut up. See? I really am tired. So that was my contribution. That was my journey, like from bed. That's pretty lame, I realize. I would have gone to some swampy place with reptiles. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I can't tell you directly, but I know I've been traveling from city to city with, sort of talking about this series with public radio stations and the Nature Conservancy. And from what I hear from the Conservancy, after the fact, they've been able to, people have been moved by this sharing of story and understanding that people need to hear in different ways and have contributed significantly, millions from what I understand. So that's very, very good for them. I don't know if public radio's done quite so well, but that's... Yes. There are some there are water stories in here. Not as many as we'd like. We have a great story from Maine about trying to bring back the groundfish. And there are stories of rivers and coastal areas, not so much deep sea. I mean, really what we like to do is do more. I mean, we like to keep going and do more. Visa funded this one. Yeah, but there's a lot of world out there. We didn't get to Africa, for example. We missed that continent. We got, I think that was the only one we missed. Antarctica, went to the North Pole, but yeah, Australia's in there. There are a lot of stories, but we could do this every, you could just go and go and go. Any other questions? Anything? I did. When Ted Koppel was at Nightline, I used to do solo crew documentaries for him, where I'd go out with a camera and report my own pieces and cut, do everything, do the sound and the picture, and work the same way we do in radio, but with a camera. That was in the 90s when the little 8mm cameras were just coming out, the 8mm video, and you could actually do that solo crew stuff. And I did quite a few specials while he was there. When he was there, it was a really great show and a wonderful place to work, and I love that. I mean, I like the sort of the intimate story with TV, the thing that it can do that radio can't do, especially if you're holding the camera and talking to somebody and they're looking at you through the lenses, that their eyes hit the focal plane, and when you play it back on TV, they appear to be looking directly at you, and there are things that the eyes can carry that are perhaps as mysterious as the voice, and sometimes some of that work is really arresting for that reason. So I love doing that work. I do longitudinal studies. I would do them on like delinquent boys or addicts in recovery, and I would spend a long, long time with people. Other things? Well, this series got funding. The Nature Conservancy secured funding from Visa, and they funded it handsomely, and we were able to promote it really well, and we had a good travel budget, and it was, you know, it was a, like I say, it was a real pleasure in public radio to be working on a series like this. So that doesn't happen very often. Usually we're stitching together 20 different donors and just crawling across the line to make it. This one we didn't have to do that. It was amazing. I don't expect it to happen again very soon. But that's a bad attitude. What's a personal favorite story? I don't. That would be unfair and impolitic. And you know, I'm not sure. Each one for different reasons. I love Scott Carrier's writing. You know, there are things in that story. The energy of Jonathan Goldstein and his kid. I mean, each one has a different appeal to me. So. I mean, I really can't say. People ask me that often with this, I believe, and really, it's whichever one I'm working on at that moment. That's the one that's my favorite. I'm working on some. There's some really. If you like that series, there's some really good ones coming up next week. The head of the National Institute of Mental Health, who just heard the series on the air and always wanted to write one, woke up in the middle of the night and wrote an essay. About his son who has autism. It's a beautiful essay, and he sent it in to us just over the transom. It's about a belief in adaptation and about the first time he saw his son flap his arms and realized it was a sign of autism, and what a tragic moment it was. And his son's terribly autistic, I guess, and very no language, and but how over time he's come to realize that flapping for his son Kobe means that he's joyful, and that the thing that he once brought him heartbreak now brings him joy. And it's a metaphor about how we adapt to all the problems in life, and that's our challenge. It's beautiful. I mean, that series is amazing. Any other things before you wander off? I'll be staying around for a little while, so. If there's anything you want to ask, check this stuff out online. You can go to iTunes and get the whole thing if you want. And I really appreciate your invitation to be here, and I'm looking forward to getting the swamp.
Thank you, Jay, so much. That was absolutely wonderful. I'm Shelley Lackley. I'm the new state director for the Nature Conservancy, and I've learned to do this now. I just want to say thank you all for being here. What Jay really brought up was stories that resonate, and for me, the power of the shared story. Two of the things that he talked about really resonated with me. One of them, believe it or not, I spent the summer in Mongolia with Sherry, who just took a picture, and we worked with Mongolian Public Radio. I guess MPR is what we call it there. And one of our assignments was to work with the local people to create a public service announcement in Mongolia. And we were with a group of Westerners and then a group of Mongolians, and we didn't speak Mongolian and they didn't speak much English. And we were trying to figure out what to do on this PSA. Well, they started doing this beautiful throat singing. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it, but it's the way that they sing, and they don't move their mouths. It's all in the throat. And they sang the national anthem of Mongolia to us with their throat singing. And so they sang the anthem, and then we sang our anthem back. And here we were without any other communication except for music in a verbal way that really allowed us to connect. And it was really a wonderful moment. It was really funny. After they finished singing, we all looked around and thought, wow, that's really weird, that throat singing, but it's really cool. And I'm sure they went, wow, that's really weird, that mouth singing, but it looks pretty cool. So, that really resonated with me. And that's really what the Nature Conservancy does. When I think about the second thing that resonated, whenever he played the swamp sounds, who is from Georgia? Sounds like growing up, right? I mean, you remember growing up and you walk outside, the cicadas are so loud that you almost can't even hear yourself, and you don't even realize they're so loud till you take a second to listen. And that really resonates with me. So, Jay, I really hope that whenever you're down at Dink's Place in the swamp this weekend, that you can come back with an Altamaha story for us, because that's something that really is powerful for us. Again, that's what we do as the Nature Conservancy. Thank you so much for your support today. I want to thank the Carter Center. You guys have been a phenomenal partner, and we're so proud to have you as a partner and to have this venue that's allowed us to share these sort of experiences with hundreds of people. Also, Public Broadcasting Atlanta and WABE, thank you so much for your support. We're very proud that Jay Allison's work will be on your station in the upcoming weeks, so please make sure that you all tune in for that. And finally, I want to thank all of you for joining us this weekend, or I'm sorry, this evening. I'm already looking for the weekend. For this evening, I think it was a wonderful event and really was something that was unique for me and was truly fulfilling. And I didn't get to see the gentleman that asked the contribution question, but absolutely, your contributions are what makes us able to conserve more of these wild places. So thank you all for being here this evening. I think Jay said he'd be around for some questions, and I look forward to seeing you at future events. Good evening.